We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast.
Boom! Headshot!
Hey, it's Clay. How you guys doing? And I got a new Planetside 2 video for you today, and this time I want to talk about weapons. You see a lot of guys doing videos like this in other popular FPS games, whether it's Battlefield 3 or Call of Duty. You know, people really digging in deep into the statistics about weapons to kind of gain some new insight and explain why they feel the way they feel on the battlefield when you're out shooting people. But one thing I've noticed about Planetside 2 thus far is that it's a little bit more mysterious in terms of with the way that weapons react and how they perform. Some of their statistics, there just is not a lot of information out there. And then when you combine that with the fact that you have to oftentimes pay for them, either with a lot of experience or with, you know, your own hard-earned cash, because it is a free-to-play game, you know, you kind of have this space where you want to know what your best choices are in terms of buying weapons, but you really are kind of uninformed. And I've kind of found myself left in this space where I just kind of end up trying a gun, and I don't really know if it's a good choice or not, and I just am kind of like shrugging my shoulders saying I don't really know what to do. And, you know, I've got this station cache. I actually participated in the Alpha Squad deal back in beta, so I've got all this money, and I don't really know what to spend it on. So I decided to do some hunting to figure some things out, and I wanted to share with you guys the results. So this is kind of directed at any of you guys who are wondering, you know, what should I be spending my station cache on? What should I be spending my certifications on? Which weapons do what? What's kind of better for what situations? You know, because a lot of times those little sliders on the screen aren't very clear. So let's look a little bit more in depth at the statistics to see exactly what's going on. So in this first episode, I want to talk about the Vanu Sovereignty assault rifles. I have thus far spent most of my time playing on Vanu. I've spent a lot of time playing the medic class. So this is going to kind of be my insight on these weapons. The Pulsar VS1 is the weapon that everyone starts out with, and it's a solid choice, very much an all-around type of gun. And then you've got, you know, some of these other choices: the Equinox with its standard and burst variant, the CME, which is more of a slow-firing type of gun, and the HV45, which was very much a higher fire rate. So just a couple things to note about these guns in Planetside 2 in general. In Planetside 2, players have 500 health points and 500 shield points. Now this is only different because of the infiltrators, who only have 400 health points and 500 shield points. So everybody has roughly 1,000 points of damage, assuming that they don't have any health damage underneath their shields already. So when you look at these values, keep that in mind, that this is based on a 1,000 damage scale, so it's definitely more of a higher bullets to kill ratio. I know a lot of other games use a 100 point scale, and then things scale a little bit more quickly, but in this game it's a little bit more slower time to kill, so just kind of keep that in mind. Now with the assault rifles, they all have a very similar damage kind of system. So they have a maximum damage of 143 points of damage, and this is at 10 meters. And then it scales down in a linear fashion all the way out to 115 meters, where it's only doing 112 damage. So if you do that calculations, 143 divided by 1,000, that's going to give you about 6 shots to kill, almost 7. And then if you go to the minimum damage of 112, that'll give you 8, almost 9 shots to kill. So you're looking at somewhere between 6 and 9 bullets to kill your enemy. So it's definitely a little bit more of a higher time to kill, but this is definitely the same in terms of all the assault rifles that you can use on Vanu. And actually this is pretty much standard for most of the other races as well. A unique thing about Vanu is that they don't have any projectile drop. So that's kind of an interesting, you know, thing about this as well, is you don't really have to gauge the projectile drop when you're trying to scale things down at range. A lot of the things that differentiate the assault rifles is going to be your reload time, your recoil, and your rate of fire. Those are definitely going to be the biggest things. You also have projectile velocity and movement. So there's a lot of ways in which these guns balance out one another. So let's start with the Pulsar. It comes in with a reload of 1.75 and 2.2, so that's your short reload, which means that you still have a round left in the chamber, although I don't know if that necessarily works for Vanu because they have energy particles, but I'm just going to go with that because that's how it makes sense to me. This is actually the fastest reloading gun, assault rifle in the medic class for Vanu. So very, very fast reload, very, very nice. Now in terms of recoil, we've got a .22, which pulls up and to the right, which is good. It's not the best, but it's still quite good. Your first shot recoil is going to be 2.75, which is solid. It's one of the better choices as well, but not the best. Your ADS movement speed is 0.5, which is okay. It's not the best as well. And now let's moving on to the rate of fire rates. It comes in at 698 RPM, which is very much middle of the road. It's tied for the second fastest actually in the category. So definitely a solid choice. Not the slowest, not the fastest. Overall, also has a projectile velocity of 615. Overall, the Pulsar VS1 is a very all-around weapon. In terms of the Vanu medic class, this gun is very much middle of the road. 698 rounds per minute is not going to, go blazing, so it's not going to be the most effective gun at short range. But the recoil also is not so high that it makes it impossible to use at long range. So it's a very, very all-around gun. A great choice for starting off, getting you into the game. It's not going to do anything amazing, but it's also not going to do anything horrible. Now, going on to the HV45, this gun is very much more of a close quarters monster. It has a rate of fire of 800 RPM, and it also has a faster ADS movement speed. So it's very, very much designed to being in close quarters and just wrecking people with that high rate of fire. But it trades that off for having a very, very painfully slow reload time of 2.55 and 3.2, which is the longest in this category. Very, very long reload. Now the recoil is interesting. Now you have to remember 800 RPM, any recoil you're going to feel it a lot more intense than a slower RPM gun. So we have a 0.2 recoil, which is actually better than the Pulsar, but it actually also has a 3x first shot multiplier. So it's definitely you're gonna feel more recoil than the Pulsar, but you definitely get the benefit of more stopping power. Very much a close quarters gun, excellent for those kinds of engagements. Now moving on to the CME, this gun has the tied for the slowest RPM of the class, but it has a very, very good projectile velocity, and it also has very manageable recoil. If you have slower RPM and it also has this 0.2 low recoil, it's going to be very easy to manage at range. A slower reload time, but that's not going to hurt you quite so badly, because this gun is definitely designed much more for long-range engagements. It does have a 3 times first shot multiplier recoil, but for more sustained fire, using that 645 RPM with a 0.2 pull up into the right, it's going to be very, very manageable in terms of medium and long-range engagements. And in Planetside too, you've got a lot of really big, wide-open spaces, so having a little bit slower rate of fire, and a lower recoil can be really, really helpful in terms of, just helping you get those kills at longer ranges. Because we're not playing Call of Duty. This game has a lot more long-range gunfights, so being able to be effective at those ranges is really important. Now lastly, the Equinox and Equinox Burst. I've actually spent a lot of time with the Equinox. I have unlocked both of these guns, so I can also speak from first-hand experience. The Equinox is an interesting choice compared to the Pulsar. They're both fairly similar. The Equinox has a slower RPM, 645, versus the 698 of the Pulsar, but it does have better recoil. It has both a better first-shot recoil, which is the best in class, 2.25x, and a 2.45 pull up into the right. So a solid recoil, slower RPM. I mean, this gun is definitely all around. It's got a good reload speed, 1.8 and 2.4. It's also a very, very all-around choice. Perhaps a little bit better at range, just because it has the slower RPM, the better first shot multiplier recoil, a little bit worse sustained recoil, but overall I find this gun to be really, really effective, more at medium ranges to longer ranges, but the difference is very slight. Compared to the Pulsar, they're both pretty similar weapons. I really can't say there's a huge difference. Now the Burst actually has a little bit faster RPM, but it is in burst mode. You're gonna have to keep that in mind. So it makes it a little more interesting. You technically have a ability of achieving 698 rounds per minute, which is faster than the 645 of the standard Equinox, but it's going to be in burst mode. So you definitely have to place more of a premium on making those shots count. It has a lower recoil, but a higher first shot recoil multiplier. But also you have to keep in mind, again, it's in burst mode. So you've got those 3-round bursts. You're going to have a little bit of a pause in between. Overall, I find that the Equinox Burst is really effective if you're skilled, if your aim is really good, but it's less forgiving. I find the Equinox and the Pulsar are a lot more forgiving in that regard. But they're definitely good choices. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch over, talk about my impressions about these weapons, how they feel and how they respond, and kind of how these numbers play out on the battlefield itself. So Planetside 2, you kind of need to rethink weapon balance. You need to rethink the ideal weapon choice and compared to a lot of other popular first-person shooters just because of the size and scale of the game. You know, we're dealing with 6,000 player servers, 2,000 player continents, you know, really, really big battles, long-range lines of sight. You know, also with these really close quarter tech lab battles inside buildings trying to capture points. You know, Planetside 2 is extremely, you know, versatile in terms of your engagements you're going to come into, in terms of the ranges you're going to face opponents at. So picking a weapon that, you know, is ideal for a multitude of situations is extremely important. And I found that I really need to rethink the way that I go about making these decisions in Planetside 2. You know, when you look at other games like Battlefield 3, for instance, you really want to maximize rate of fire, because for the most part, all the weapons in a class had a similar damage output, but you want to select high rate of fire just at the point where the recoil is manageable but not too crazy. You know, it's moderate to high recoil but not too crazy to the point where it's unmanageable. You know, some of the lower RPM weapons, sure they're great and sure you're going to be on target, but if you can master the recoil with a higher rate of fire weapon, you're always going to be in a better situation. Now in Planetside 2, I find that it really stresses and emphasizes longer range engagements, so having a slower rate of fire, lower recoil weapon is really, really valuable. You know, because I found that a lot of times, you know, with a fully automatic weapon, you're going to be bursting, you're going to be almost single-shotting. You really need to have a premium on accuracy because your engagements you're going to run into where you're going to be shooting at other players is more at a medium to long range. There are close range engagements, but they tend to be a little bit more rare and they tend to be a little bit more predictable. So my thoughts on this whole thing is that I would prefer more of a, you know, high accuracy weapon as kind of my standard all-around medic rifle, and I like to have a high fire rate weapon to go to. You know, maybe whether we're trying to defend a tech lab, and I know that I'm going to be able to spawn in and have consistent close counter engagements, you know, and it's a little bit more predictable. That's just kind of my take on it. So the weapons like the Pulsar and the Equinox are really, really strong candidates. Even the CME, both the Pulsar and the Equinox have very moderate to low recoil, and you know, the RPMs are definitely manageable, you know, especially the Equinox coming in at 645 RPM. The recoil is 0.245, I'm sorry, 0.245, yes, and then also a really, really nice thing about this gun is that its first shot recoil multiplier is 2.25, which is the lowest in its class, making the Equinox a really fantastic choice. Slower RPM, yes, but very, very accurate, very, very good at those medium to long range fights. I think that this has been the rifle I've spent the most time with for good reason, because it definitely helps in terms of those longer range shots, just to get those bullets, you know, firing really accurately. You know, and I'll still throw on a foregrip and maybe even a compensator just to really help make sure that I'm staying accurate. Just because I found in Planetside 2, accuracy is absolute king. Not to say that the Pulsar is a slouch. It actually has better recoil than the Equinox, but it does have a higher first shot recoil multiplier, so it's going to be a little bit better for those sustained fire, but it does also have a little bit higher projectile velocity, so any recoil you're going to feel it a little bit more. I'm sorry, a little bit higher RPM, but you're going to feel it a little bit more, even if the recoil number is lower. So overall, I think the Pulsar and the Equinox are really solid choices. I also think the Equinox Burst is a good choice. You know, it definitely is a little bit more of a skilled weapon. You definitely need to make sure that those bursts are hitting their target, just because of you know, you don't have the forgiveness of a fully auto weapon. So I don't think it's maybe as versatile as the Pulsar and the standard Equinox, but it definitely is a really good choice if you want to focus on more of that longer range battle rifle role. You know, the CME is also a really excellent choice, just for making, you know, having those really focusing on those long range. It's got a little bit longer reload time, which can get you in trouble, which I don't really care for, but it does have a slower RPM. It's got a you know, a 0.2 recoil, 645 RPM, really, really good stats there for accuracy. You know, it does have a 3x first shot multiplier, so it's got a little bit higher on the initial recoil. But you know, overall, it's a solid choice for sure. Now, the HV45 is kind of a unique choice within this setup. It does have a consistent, substantially higher RPM at 800. So I found that this weapon is not necessarily as well suited to being kind of this all-around beast that you can use in any place. It's a little bit more well suited for those specific close-range engagements. It doesn't have a high amount of recoil, but it does have a higher RPM and a higher first shot recoil multiplier. So your accuracy at longer ranges is going to suffer. But it definitely is something that I would be happy to switch to when I know that I'm going to probably run into guys a little more close range. Also, if I just kind of try to play the map a little bit more, conscientiously, knowing that I want to get close range battles, I think that it can be a really solid choice. But it definitely is not my favorite in terms of these assault rifles, just because I really find that Planetside 2 places such an emphasis on accuracy. But really, with all these things, it definitely is up to some personal preference and your personal playstyle. For me, the Equinox is king. I'm happy that I spent the money that I did on it, and I've been really putting the time in. My favorite loadout has become the foregrip and the compensator to lower both horizontal and vertical recoil. You do get a little bit of the compensator specifically has some drawbacks. You show up a little bit more on the extended on the radar, on the minimap when you fire, and it also reduces your hip fire effectiveness, which in my opinion is really not a huge problem. I don't find myself hip firing that often, just because, like I said before, long range engagements happen so frequently. I would much rather be able to control that recoil effectively. I also really like the soft point armor, or soft point bullets. They increase your damage at kind of this medium range, which is really, really awesome. I definitely prefer it, and it has a pretty decent projectile velocity, so you're not really hurting. You're not really going to be missing a little bit of the hit there to projectile velocity. So that's definitely the setup that I would recommend. But I definitely think that with these customization and attachment options, there's a lot of personal preference. If you want to be a real close range monster, put in the laser sight on the HV45 would be really beastly. You would drop guys really fast with that hip fire. But if you want to be a little more long range, maybe doing the Equinox burst, putting a higher zoom scope, maybe a 3.4 hollow scope would be a really good choice. But it's really hard to go wrong with an Equinox or a Pulsar, foregrip, compensator, 1x scope. It's a really, really good versatile choice for this assault rifle. It's definitely my recommendation. So I hope that this helps kind of clear up some things for you guys. I hope that when you're spending cert points, or if you're sending station cash, that you can make some more informed decisions on buying these weapons at Planetside 2. There really is a lot of variety, and I would hate for you guys to make some purchases here and end up regretting them. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys if you want me to go more in depth in other weapons, other classes. There's a ton of stuff to go into. I have been playing a little bit around with the Infiltrator class, some of the different sniper rifles. There's just a lot to discover here in Planetside 2, so please leave me some feedback if you enjoy hearing more of these in-depth type of weapon guides for Planetside 2. But I'm going to sign it off here. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you soon.